Howdy y'all, I'm PaintThatBell. Are you tired of drawing your hair like this? Well, today what I'll be doing is I'm going to draw some hair like this and show you the 4 easy steps to draw hair like this. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Okay, so I already got my base here for the drawing. This is my Minecraft character, but that's irrelevant. So you want to know how to draw hair, don't you? Well, look no further, because you're in the right place. Hair can be tricky to get. It's a lot of strands. It can look really complicated to draw. Sometimes it can leave you in a hairy situation. And just so you know, yes, pun intended, and every pun from here on out is intended. And as a special challenge for me to you for extra bounty points, see how many sneaky puns I put in. Each pun you find is worth 1 bounty point. But enough dilly-dallying, let's go ahead and get right into step 1. Step 1 is drawing out the form. What I mean by that is you need to draw the shape of the hair. Now a little tip is, nobody's hair is completely straight. You can have straight hair, and I've seen extremely straight and fine hair, but what I've noticed in my years of drawing experience is that hair tends to follow the shape of the head. So, have your rounded head, right? You know, have it all drawn out. Well, hair will typically curve around the head before falling straight or curly or whatever you want for the hair. Another thing to keep in mind is the shoulders. If the hair is drawn completely behind the head, then don't worry, but hair, typically most of the time, you'll see longer hair just droop over the shoulders. And just like with the head, the hair tends to follow the shape of the shoulders. So whether the person you're drawing has big shoulders, small shoulders, well-rounded shoulders, best to keep in mind the shape of the shoulders and the head before you go drawing the hair shape. So on a head of hair, you'll see overlapping each other and get pretty locked in there. Of course, each head of hair is different, so you'll need so if you need to have a reference, then by all means use it. The next step is to draw the clumps. Much of many beginners, what they do is that they try to draw hair with each individual little strand, leaving many new artists feeling stranded when it comes to drawing hair and when it doesn't look like hair. But the secret to drawing hair is actually not to draw the individual strands. What you need to do is draw hair in clumps. Typically what hair does is it tends to clump together and each clump casts shadows on the hair. So to give you an idea, I'm drawing my hair in clumps, as you can see. Just drawing different chunks like this really works wonders when trying to draw hair. Now this character's hair is rather spiky, so there's a lot of tufts of hair, but it's still all the clumps together, as you can see. It all forms a shape. And really, in any drawing of anything, you need to use shapes anyway, because everything is made out of shapes before you go and define the actual shape afterwards. So these clumps are mostly straight, right? Well, for straight hair, I recommend doing something similar to this, but adjusting where needed. Maybe make your hair less spiky if it's not spiky, or longer. Now for curly hair, that's where it gets interesting. So I'm going to use my channel's avatar here. Hey, wait, what are you doing? Hush up, I'm using you as an example. I don't like this. I don't care. It's for educational purposes. You don't want to disappoint the people now, do you? Thank you. Now, so what I did here to make curly hair is I used a corkscrew-like shape. And what that basically means is I use parallel diagonal lines. And if you don't know what that is, parallel is basically 2 lines that are on the opposite side of any direction. So whenever you're drawing a line, there is one that is likely to be above or to the side of it. And I think everyone knows what diagonal means, and if you don't, then my apologies, but go look it up. Ain't that hard. So like I was saying, I use 2 parallel diagonal lines and make a square. Kind of like a parallelogram, which is just a crooked square. Then I do the same thing, except I flip it horizontally, and I keep on doing that all the way throughout the curl. Once all that's said and done, I soften up the shapes, and boom, you got your curl clump. Using value. Now typically I don't have to do this since I already know where my shadows and lights are going to be due to how many years I've been drawing, but for the sake of education, I'm explaining it to y'all and how to do it so that you'll know how to shade hair. Now if you're drawing traditionally, this might not be the most useful of tip unless you're using graphite pencils, which if you're using graphite pencils, this is basically a necessary step in the process. But if you're not, then I'm sorry for all those colored pencil users out there, because I have to explain how to draw that later on in the video. But first, value. Value is essentially where light and dark shades sit on an object. I'm going to briefly explain light and shadows. When it comes to drawing light and shadows, what you want to do is follow the shape of the object and the direction of your light source. Make sure you know your light source before anything else, because shadows and light will always fall in the direction of where the light source is. Also, know how strong your light source is. The stronger your light source, the less you have to use heavy shading. The softer your light source, the more shading you have to do. Knowing this, you can kind of make an educated guess of your value. If nothing else, references come in handy. I am not going to stop advocating how useful references are, because they are stinking useful. Oh, another tip when it comes to hair is that some clumps overlap the others, so they tend to cast shadows on the clumps underneath. Basically, value is nothing more than how to shade, and that's a valuable thing to learn. We're on to our last step, which is adding texture. Now, by the way, the way I'm doing it is through inking, but unless you know what you're doing, I don't recommend you doing it, especially if you're drawing traditionally, since once you put your inks down traditionally, there ain't going back. Now for texture, what you need to know is you need to follow the shape of the clumps. If I can English today, that would be great. Basically, hair tends to bunch together, and the strands are what best show it. Another thing when it comes to texture is you see less and less of the strands when there's light shining on the subject. There's still some here or there where the light strongly hits, but not as much as where the darker areas are, especially where there are bunched up areas. Around areas where there's a lot of hair that tends to overlap, there are a lot of shadows in there too. If you haven't noticed how I'm drawing it either, I'm drawing it following the shape of the clumps, where I'm drawing it following the shape of the clumps and where the hair wants to fall, but I'm also paying mind to the value that I've used, so I don't use too much an area where it's supposed to be. But I'm also using long, smooth, quick strokes. That's typically how I go about when it comes to texture. Oh, and don't forget to add in a few flyaway hairs. Those really make or break the way the hair looks when you're drawing it. Now, I can't see a better way of adding it all together than trying to draw hair realistically with color. Typically, what you want to do is apply all the steps that I've used above. Assuming that you've already got the shape of your hair and the clumps down, then you're good to go and color the hair. Digitally, what you want to do is follow the value, except with color, and it's important to note that when coloring hair, you won't just have that exact same hair color, but with dark variations of it. No, red hair, for example, has a lot of browns, blacks, blonde even. It's just the most prominent color is red. Just an important thing to keep note of. Another important note is that you need to keep an eye on your value. Lighter colors is where the light hits, and darker colors is where less light hits and more hair clumps together. When you have all the colors that you want, then you can go ahead and add the texture by using darker colors, where there will be more clumps of hair together or where it overlaps. Basically, it's the same as when I ink. Long, quick, smooth strokes. Now for traditional coloring, it's a bit different. What you want to do when you traditionally color is essentially layer on different colors. Don't slather the drawing in your darkest color, as you won't be able to add in the light areas of the hair as well. You start with the lightest color you have. Typically, this would be a very light yellow for blonde, red, and brown, even black, believe it or not. That lightest color is for where the light hits, and depending on the color you're drawn, you'll see more or less of this color. You'll definitely see it a lot in blonde hair. Red hair, you see it a bit less, but it's still pretty prominent. And it's even sparser in brown hair, but it's still there. And black hair, you can hardly even see it usually, but it's there and will make it look that much better if you put that light yellow in. But it's totally optional. I've seen famous artists not add it and it looks just as good, so, you know, art's subjective. Now once you set down your lightest color, add the next lightest color and use it in areas where there would be shading. You know, setting down the value as you go along. From there you keep on using the next lightest color until you essentially used up all the colors that you want to use. So black is the darkest, and I recommend using only those in the darkest spots of hair. Yes, even black hair, seeing as black hair is mostly dark browns, even in the darker spots. So even in black hair, use black in the darkest spots possible. Got it? Basically, the only thing you should do differently when it comes to traditionally coloring hair is the value and the fact that you need to layer lightly. I kid you not, you need to layer lightly, or you'll ruin all your light areas of hair and you can't undo that. So that's it. Hope you found this 4-step tutorial useful. Now, I hope you found this 4-step tutorial useful, and if not, there's plenty of other tutorials online that I can recommend for you if you need. I'm just here to provide a means of learning how to draw hair. I don't care how you learn. So, you know, I'm here if you need any other tutorials. But that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. And you know what? Please type below what you would like to see for future art tutorials. I'll try and cover any art tutorial that I can with the best of my abilities. But until next week, I'll see ya later. Stay artsy, my artist armada. Later, Gators.